So I'm delighted to be here, and part of my role kicking off this morning is just to lay out some general principles and ideas and practices for using social media in our congregations, both using it as individuals for religious educators, ministers, other religious professionals, lay people who represent the congregation, and also using it institutionally. Peter's going to go into a lot of specific examples in his presentation, and I think when you're in your groups later today, that'll be another opportunity to really drill down to some detailed scenarios. So if you're feeling as I go along like it's kind of broad, don't worry, because there's an opportunity to go deeper and more detail. This is just a chance for us to start to lay out the main questions and ideas. Ooh. Okay, so I provided these two links. UUA.org/social media. That's like the main page for the UUA's resources on social media. So if, as I'm talking, you're thinking, oh, Twitter, I want to learn more about that. Does the UUA have any resources on it? This is the place to go, and all of our resources are there. And then I also provided a link to the UUA New Media blog, which has some additional things. And at the top of that right now is a very interesting paper on online identity for ministers. So that's newmedia.blogs.uua.org. So the three mini keynotes today are technological landscape of social media. So that's just laying out, what are the broad trends in social media in our society, and then what are some specific tools, and how can we start to discern whether or not those tools are a good fit for our congregation. The second keynote is going to be about the relationship between congregational purpose and mission and social media engagement. And then the third will be about theological and ethical implications of social media, addressing broadly some of the main questions that are often raised. Is everyone still able to hear me? Great. All right, let's get started. So I started on the bright side with the opportunities that the social media revolution presents for our congregations. Obviously, the heart of social media is the increased ability of people to self-publish. So the ability to get out content that used to be very expensive or difficult or time-consuming to circulate, they can now be easily made available to the general public. The viral spread of information, and we've seen that go up exponentially since websites, email, and now with the tools like Facebook, the opportunities and the possibilities for information that you put out to be shared very, very widely have dramatically increased. For congregations specifically, as well as other kinds of nonprofits and organizations, there's an amazing opportunity to build relationships with people with a low barrier to entry. So somebody doesn't even have to sort of get up the nerve to put on their best and come to your church on Sunday morning and walk through the door to find out what you have to offer. There's a kind of safe experience for seekers on the internet to start to explore what your community is. So that's sort of a new opportunity that I think wasn't there in the past. The opportunity for holistic relationship building. So this is both an opportunity and a challenge, and it gets to what Sue was saying about the sharing of your full life on the internet, especially through sites like Facebook. The difficulty now of compartmentalizing parts of your life out, but that's also an opportunity for congregants and staff and seekers, for people to get to know one another as full people. So I see that as an opportunity as well as a challenge. And then the other opportunity for congregations is to integrate our messages and resources into one another's lives throughout the week. So to be part of somebody's morning when they get up in the morning and they log onto their Facebook or they check their Twitter, to be part of their commute as they listen to a sermon or a prayer on a podcast, to really just be with one another throughout the day is sort of a new and exciting opportunity for our congregations. I think it'll be available as a PowerPoint later. I haven't uploaded it yet, but Sue and I can work on that. I don't think you need to write down everything I'm saying. We will make something available. If I need to, like if it's not possible to do it through the district for some reason, I'll put it on uua.org/social media. Sue?
I just want to clarify that both Shelby's and Peter's presentation will be available on the Mass Davis website, and you can print it out. Some of that will come in the form of, along with your evaluation, it will arrive in your boxes this afternoon.
Okay, so what are the challenges that we're facing with the social media landscape? So one of the major challenges that I think all organizations are facing is the lack of a central communications channel to reach all of your constituents. So suddenly, some people say, I never check email anymore, I only want Facebook. I never check the postal mail, I only want things over email. And you're like thinking, well, how many times am I going to have to duplicate the same piece of content to reach people? And I know at the UUA, I've kind of just come to terms with that is what we're going to have to do. You do have to be on a certain number of platforms now to reach people, but that can be discouraging. What can be inspiring about it is the idea that you're not just reaching the same people all over again, but actually reaching more people using the tools that are necessary. Another challenge is the potential decrease in the control of personal and congregational image. So what does it mean to be collaborative in building the way that we present ourselves and our institutions? And how do we make that a productive and exciting thing rather than something that feels out of control? An increase in the amount of content. So both for content producers and consumers, if you are administering, for instance, a Twitter feed, I talked to somebody the other day who, her congregation has like 900 followers of their Twitter feed. And she said, oh, I tweet like 15 or 20 times a day. And I was like, wow, I'm excited she's reaching so many people, but not everybody is able to put out that level of content, and not everybody, some of you say, no, that's not for you. And not everybody's able to consume it either. And so how do we cut through the sense of content overload to provide constituents with information that is useful and timely, and they can act on it, but they're not feeling barraged, and we're not feeling that we need to be constantly coming up with news. And then, of course, there are questions about how to translate real-world relationship norms into online norms. And those are the hardest questions, because we all have different ways, first of all, of behaving in real life. I mean, something I might think is appropriate might not seem appropriate to someone else, or vice versa. And then there isn't an exact equivalence between an online interaction and a real-world one. So trying to figure out what are our shared behavioral norms and what are equivalent situations online in which we can apply them. But I think the important principle here is that we are trying to make that bridge, that kind of consistency. Okay, so now I'm getting into some of the general principles for social media engagement, and hopefully you can start to see a matchup between what these principles are and what the opportunities and challenges are that I've described. So the first one is the centrality of mission, and I think the title of today's conference probably made that very clear, that we're making a direct relationship between the congregation's mission and the use of social media. And I just think that can't be said enough, that when you're in it, not because the tool is really neat, or everybody says I should be on X, but because you really believe you can accomplish something for a movement, it becomes much easier to make choices and set a strategy. Adding value. So what does your congregation, or what do you have to share about our faith that people can't get anywhere else? What are you giving them in that day that they are getting your content that is going to make their day better, and it's going to make them be glad that they are connected online with you? So that goes right to posting meaningful content. So even if you're on a tool where like 80% of what you see is like, I just played Mafia, or like, I just got a pig in Farmville, or whatever. You don't have to do that. Just because that's what is out there doesn't mean you are controlled by that. You decide what you post, and you think about if something that you're posting means something to you. If you are happy to read it in the morning, probably someone else will be too. Clarity of asks or invitations. This is about content overload. It's also just the way the tools are structured with short spaces for updates. Just ask what you need to ask. If you want people to share something, say, please share this. If it's an invitation to an event, time, date, place, and link should be really, really clear. Consistency of tone and types of content. So I want to know if I'm subscribing to a Twitter feed or I'm fanning a page, what am I going to get? And there should be some consistency. I know I'm getting a mix of meditations, church news, updates about major events in the life of the congregation, and I know that they're going to be consistent in tone, that they're all, for instance, going to have a friendly, respectful, upbeat tone. Scheduling. So for I manage the UUA's social media presence, and I find it gives me sanity to know most of the time I try to post one thing every morning before noon. And unless there's a piece of information people really need after that, I can set that aside for the day and move on. And I think that our constituents appreciate it too. They know, okay, I get up each morning, by noon there'll be a piece of news, I get it, we do Monday meditations. It's every Monday morning. It's right around 10 a.m. And people can start to count on it. And then also another principle is healthy relationships. We talked a little bit about that already. Bringing your best self to social media. I think this is kind of obvious, but sometimes we think of it as like a playground or there's like a loophole or something. It's really not. It's the opposite. It's public and it's permanent. So we want to be our very best on the internet. And setting clear and enforced expectations for how we're going to conduct ourselves, especially as professionals, and what's appropriate in our congregation. So thinking in advance about how you will respond to certain scenarios and then consistently implementing that. And we'll talk more about that in the rest of the presentation, what that looks like. Okay, so one of the questions I've gotten a lot in the last year is, now there are so many tools, how do I know which one my congregation needs to be on? So this is a little process I came up with. So starting with clarifying the mission and the goals, and then analyzing opportunities to further the mission of the congregation. So this is drilling down from our mission is to heal our world, or part of our mission is to heal our world, to, okay, and what is our specific goal that, you know, how can we do that in a more tailored way to our congregation? And then to ask really detailed questions, starting to come up with a real plan. Researching the tools available and then choosing a tool. So you'll notice that this is like the exact inverse of how sometimes it's done. Choosing the tool and then figuring out how you can use it. This is, what do we want to do in an ideal world? And then where does that lead us? Okay, so analyzing opportunities within the congregation. So looking at the congregation's gifts and opportunities. And I mentioned leaders' inner gifts because really social media is usually somebody's personality being reflected or some collection of personalities. So what do you have in your soul to give to other people that you might be able to translate online? Looking at content, so this is things like, are you already having, you know, book signings at your congregation and book talks, and they're already being recorded, and wouldn't it be nice to share those with other people if you believe that that furthers a particular mission of the congregation? Or an obvious example is we're already having sermons on Sunday morning. How can we share those with people? And then also looking at the community around the congregation. What's happening in the community? How are people in the community using social media? And what are the opportunities that are unique to this congregation? And then also drawing on existing successes. So if there are programs that are furthering your mission already, amplify them online by all means. But at the same time, looking at, are there things we've always wanted to do and we couldn't do them before because we didn't have the technology? And maybe there's an opportunity to minister online or to evangelize online that's different than what we were previously able to do, but aligns with our capabilities. So asking questions, this is really like coming up with a plan. Who's going to do this? Who's the audience? What kinds of content are we going to share? When are we going to do it? What would our schedule look like? How often are we going to come back and reevaluate what we're doing? And this final question is a little bit less, it's a little bit less concrete, but it has to do with how are we going to get the word out to people in our congregation and in the community, and how are we going to maintain our safety and ethics in this space? So we'll talk more about those in the third keynote. But once you have this level of specificity for your congregation, then it's time to start thinking about, okay, what are the tools out there that might match this? Okay, so we're going to get started. Just talking about, I'm going to assume that everybody here, for instance, knows what a blog is or knows what Facebook is, and talk more instead about what are the advantages of those particular tools? What are the things that a congregation might want to achieve where these would be a good match? Okay, so blogs, I think, are unparalleled for exploring topics at length, especially like a text-based topic, and then archiving those conversations. So you pretty much, you can't really archive something on Facebook. I mean, once you've said it and 2 years have gone by, it's kind of vanished in a sense. And you can't categorize your tweets. I mean, you can, but it's pretty hard to go back and find them later after any length of time has passed. So if you're going to have a conversation that has a lot of depth, like maybe you're talking about your congregation's covenant or something like that, where you really want to be able to go back in a few years and see all the things that people wrote in all of the posts, I think a blog really is the best tool for that. And usually it's not only can conversations be categorized, but there's usually also like a Google search bar or a comparable search bar that would allow people to do an open search on a blog. Okay, Facebook. So I think Facebook is probably the best tool for group conversations with short comments. I mean, you can rack up like 30 or 40 comments pretty quickly on a large Facebook page, and it's very exciting. So I think if you want to have a conversation that maybe isn't as in-depth, but you want a lot of people to be able to weigh in, this is a good way to do it. Promoting the person-to-person spread of information. So I often get the question, why do we need a Facebook page if we already have a website? And the reason is because people are very unlikely to like see something on your website, cut the link, paste it into an email, send it to a friend. We just don't see that like we used to. And that's in part because people are sharing that content over Facebook now, and they can just do it by clicking share. So I think that we have to make our content available in a way that people are going to share with others. Short, frequent updates, sharing different types of content. I think everyone's seen how easy it is to share a photo album on Facebook, a video. Everything is super, super easy, and there can be a real variety of content shared. And reaching a large potential audience. So one of the nice things about Facebook versus Twitter or some podcast is just that so many people are on it that you're really opening yourself to the widest possible audience of social media users. Twitter. So Twitter is a microblogging service sending out short updates. So I said it's great for short updates. Some people will say, like I heard about a minister who said, I'm really, really busy, and I'm afraid if I start a blog, I'm going to feel this obligation to post these long, in-depth pieces in addition to my sermon writing, and it's just too much for me. But I think if I could just send a quick note to congregants on my way to the potluck, that I could do that. So there may be people for whom this really is a great fit. Live reporting on events. I think that especially if you think about something like General Assembly, and you just want to say, loved this workshop, on to the next one. Oh, presenter just made a great point. Oh, I'm not sure what I think about what she just said. There's a way to do that over Twitter that's pretty effective. I don't think we've seen a comparable tool for live reporting. And then joining decentralized conversations. So this might not be something that's immediately apparent, but a conversation on Facebook is taking place on somebody's page or profile. And you have to get there to participate. Somebody controls that conversation, in effect. Whereas on Twitter, anyone can join a conversation just by adding a keyword to their tweet. So for instance, if your neighborhood, if people in your neighborhood are having a conversation, they don't have to come to your Facebook page to hear what you have to say or be a friend of yours. You can just join the conversation by putting out a tweet and adding that keyword that signifies your particular neighborhood. So there's an opportunity to be part of conversations with people who might not form a relationship with you through another tool. Podcasts and iTunes. So podcasts are basically a series of audio or video files. Most common use in our congregations is sermon podcasts that go out every week with a video or audio of the sermon. Podcasts are kind of an interesting tool in that once you've downloaded an audio or video file to a mobile device, you can access it without the internet. So I still use it all the time on the subway, where I don't get perfect internet access on my phone. It's great for people who commute by car. There's a unique way of reaching people through this medium. But it really, it's really for times when you're going to consistently produce something. So a video every few months, maybe you don't need a podcast for that. But if it's every week, then I think having a podcast and making it available on iTunes. I think this is really, really important, because that's where people go to find podcasts. And often it's a step we don't quite make it to that point. But you're going to reach a lot more people with your podcast if it's good and it's available on iTunes and not just on the congregation's website. Okay, YouTube. So I think this is probably very easy to understand. YouTube is like click of a button, uploading of a video, and making it available on the internet. And it's made available in this player, or this like box, that has all these built-in functions that allow people to share your video. So whereas a video where you just put the file up, it's hard for people to pass that along. YouTube has all these functions that allow you to really easily put it on your Facebook page, embed it on a blog, put it on a website. And I think most of our congregations have picked that one up really fast. I mean, it's so easy to use, and use of it is widespread. Other tools. So these are just things I'm not really going to talk about in depth today, but just to be aware of. Location-based social networking. How many people have heard of Foursquare? Okay, so like a fair number of folks here. This is basically a combination. It interacts with other tools. It's a combination of like Facebook and Twitter, but it has to do with updating people as to where you are in a day. So a minister told me, Naomi King in Florida, said she uses it to say to people, for instance, I'm going to be at the library and I would be happy to meet with anybody who wants to come talk with me today. Oh, I'm at the library now. And also to let people know what she does during a day, to help them understand how busy she is and where she's going and where they can find her. I also mentioned review sites. So Yelp is probably the most popular, and just to know, people are reviewing congregations. It's not just restaurants and other facilities. And you might be surprised to read, you know, if someone looks for your congregation on Yelp and there's only 1 or 2 reviews, they're not getting a very balanced image of your congregation. So it's worth, you know, you don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but just checking in every 6 months to a year, maybe a little more frequently, and see what's there, and maybe writing some nice reviews. Why not? Not nasty ones. And then mobile phone applications. So I think these are the hardest for congregations to get into because they are expensive to develop and you need a lot of technical skill. And also you could develop an application for an iPhone, but then people are using a Droid and then you have to like change the development. So it's not easy to get into mobile phone applications, but they are wildly, wildly popular. So if their capacity is there, then I think it's worth doing. All right, and then learning more about the tools. So I've sort of given you an overview of what they might be useful for, but there's really no substitute for just setting up an account and giving it a try. And then reading the help section. I think it's not like a paper manual for like a computer or something. The help sections are usually very easy to read. If it's Facebook or Twitter, you don't have to be afraid of going to the help section, and somebody has asked your question and they've answered it in really, really clear language. So it's right there for you. Don't be scared of the help section. And then ask other people. I like to ask people if they tell me they're using a particular tool, like, oh, how are you using that? And how often do you use it? And who are you communicating with? And do you like it? Do you think you're going to stick with it? Other people can be your best anecdotal resource for how the tool's integrated into their lives. Okay, so I'm going to take a little, like a break now, and Sue's going to let me know if we have some questions.